My name is Paweł Szeligowski and I'm the face and music behind the Caster project. Today I'm here with you guys and I'm going to talk a little bit about my art, about my creative process, and I'm also going to show you a project from one of the tracks that I released a few years ago called Shadowblade. The main program that I use to write and produce my music is FL Studio from ImageLine. I really love this program because it's very efficient and it's very artistic. So this program is perfect for producers like me. Generally, when I work on my music, I try to take the listener on a journey. I try to create a memorable soundscape that puts the listener into the world that I'm trying to create. I remember starting this track with this little nice driving lead, which occurs throughout most of the track. It's a plug from a plugin called Diva. That's the theme. That's what made Shadowblade what it is. And I really wanted to utilize that across most of the track. I remember making a bunch of different automations for cutoff and resonance and parameters within the Diva plugin. And another thing that's very, very important is I actually started on a little bit of higher octave, higher notes for the melody in the intro. And then whenever the first drop happens, it goes an octave lower, playing lower notes, which usually in a lot of arrangements, it's the other way around. But here it worked really nicely and it created that nice fullness and excitement. Underneath the lead, we also have this nice warm bass. Very, very deep. It's your pretty common, pretty standard respace, and it works really well with this lead together. It's only like two elements really, but they just work with each other so well that it creates that sense of fullness and depth. I also feel like you have to be very mindful of the sound selection. When I made that little loop and I added the bass and I had my drums, I felt like that's really all the track needed for the most part. And I didn't end up adding that many synths to it. I kept it rather minimal, but we can also audition some of the background elements that I have. We have this vocal here. Then we also have vocal reverb. This is just a vocal that I just played run through a bunch of reverb and delays, which creates this nice back and forth between the dry vocal and then the reverb playing at the end. And this is also something that I really, really like to do in my music and in my art, all of those back and forth contrasting elements that play with each other. I find it very musical. And now let's talk about the drums and what's happening. They are quite minimal as well. It's mostly the kick because of that 4 on the floor groove. This is a pretty straightforward kick, electronic digital kick, nothing too crazy, nothing too complex. Then it has a section where the claps are coming in as well. And we've got some cymbals. And here we also have this little amen break. It's a little nod to the classics, to older drum and bass records where amen break were especially prevalent and very, very common for people to sample, which I used just as a little feel here between the sections of the track. Because I left so much space for it and because it came out so almost like abruptly, it created this really nice magical moment. And that's something that I really like to do in my music, those really like hard cuts for certain elements to just shine through for a second or two. Another element that we have in this drum and bass section is this respace that I made in Serum. Two saw waves, detuned with a little bit of noise on top, bunch of post-processing including distortion and compression to give it that nice warmth and fullness to it. And that plays together with those screeches that I made here. I remember making that respace and feeling like yeah, this is really cool and this slaps, but it kind of needs something on top. And I got bored of this ARP by now, so let me try some different element. And I was playing around with some ideas and I made some screeches inspired by hardstyle. Another good example of that call and response back and forth contrasting kind of feeling happens between the basses in the drum and bass section, where I switch into a different bass for a moment, creating a really cool contrast. And I'm using different basses. So the first one is the Reese that we were talking about. And the second bass is this pluck bass that happens here. And again, it's inspired by some of the neo-trance sounds, and I felt like it added that nice groove underneath the ARP and the main melody. And therefore, it also created that nice rhythmic, very plucky, very fast, very driving feeling, as opposed to that very sustained, moving Reese. We also have this lead layer here, which is just a nice, funny little texture to go behind the main lead, adding just a little bit more power and beef. And speaking of lead layers, there's another one that we have here during the climax part that plays along with the main lead sound. I called it caster leads because it's this one patch from Spire that I use in most of my tracks. A little bit of a signature sound. And I'm also having a different bass here. Those three sounds, they were enough to make it really powerful and big and epic. That's like another thing with music production. You really don't need that many layers sometimes. If you select your sounds carefully and if you allow for enough space for each sound to shine through, then you really don't need much to have a really powerful and epic section. I'm not done with the track after this part. I felt very creative and very inspired to continue on that genre bending. I came up with this entire acoustic metal section for the final part of the track. Shadowblade. It was a very bold move and a really creative decision, but I think it really worked well for the track and kind of brought a very interesting ending to that previous section. I wanted to give a little shout out to the phenomenal artist that performed those guitars for me. His name is Tom. He goes by the name Hollow. He makes some really awesome music and I think you guys should definitely check it out. This was Paweł Szeligowski, the face and music behind Caster, and I hope that I managed to take you on a little journey into my world today, and I hope you gained a little bit of insight into my creative space, and that hopefully you learned something new about music production, writing, or just my art in general. Thank you so much for watching.